Hey, welcome in. This is volume 20 of Drunk on Ice. We got Mark from the Fired Up Sports Writers. All talking all things hockey this morning. Go grab your coffee, your donut, your Wawa breakfast sandwich.
Yeah,
Settle in, and we'll talk some Flyers. I know it's a sore subject for most right now, but we're gonna try to dissect the last couple weeks that was. Mark, how you doing?
good, good. Doing well. Some pretty. Did something happen yesterday with the Flyers? I feel like something happened yesterday.
Just
Little,
something like
little
just a
bit.
little bit,
Yeah, yeah,
something that the I think the entire Flyers nation has been waiting for. What ended up dropping about, I want to say about 10:30 yesterday.
yeah.
Uh, and they fire. Well, listen, we'll just jump right into it. They fired Chuck Fletcher.
Yep.
And I can only imagine that the response from the fan base post trade deadline and the things that have happened in the last couple of weeks with the Rangers coming in, taking over the stadium, and the notoriety and the publicity that got on social media. They can say they're not paying attention, but firing Chuck Fletcher after the trade deadline only tells me that someone on some level is dialed in and said, "Yo, we need to give him a pound of flesh."
Yeah, yeah. I think that's what's really. Um, that was probably the final nail in the coffin for Chuck Fletcher between the trade deadline and I was surprised myself, Don, how much publicity that Rangers game got. I mean, as a for lifelong Flyers fans, that's taboo.
Yeah,
That doesn't happen here. And
that's something that we are used to doing,
yeah, yeah,
right?
like
With all the travel fan groups that organize the cross country travel for all the major sports,
yeah,
for
yeah,
that to happen here. And I know it was kind of like the best of both worlds for Rangers fans colliding, right? Because they just trade for Kane and they get their fan base all excited about bringing in a big name. And then that first game that they thought might be his first game is a Flyers game. And then there's this influx of availability of tickets,
yeah,
and they're all within driving distance.
right, yeah,
You know, I
yeah.
just
You see that
it
stuff other places. You see that stuff in Arizona. You see that stuff in um, some of these other like maybe non-traditional hockey markets, but
right.
Philadelphia and for it to be the Rangers, I think um, is even tougher. A long time division rival, and I think between that and how the trade deadline was handled, um, I don't know that from what I've gathered and what I've read. In addition to that, was how um, maybe I think maybe the higher ups of the organization didn't really realize uh, going back a few months. I actually heard this on the 32 Thoughts podcast.
Okay.
Jeff Merrick and Elliot Friedman talked about that quite a bit. Um, that there was maybe uh, there was maybe some issues there with how the Pride Night was handled.
Okay.
Provorov not taking the warm up, um, deciding not to wear the Pride jersey. I think he cited religious reasons for that,
Yeah.
and I think that there was the higher ups were surprised by that, and as Jeff Merrick and Elliot Friedman put it on their show, was that you don't surprise your bosses, and so I think that was probably the beginning of the end, and then how things were handled after that were certainly paid or played a part in the Flyers maybe bumping this up in season. Um,
Yeah, and listen, I the other part that I find alarming, right, is that if this was kind of brewing in the background, and you still left him in charge of operating this trade deadline, that you didn't think to make a move because now, right, they fired Chuck Fletcher. Danny Briere is the, interim GM. But it's really just a title at this point because the post trade deadline, there's not really much flexibility for him to have his chance to make any moves or his chance to say, you know what, if we're really going to put an effort into trying to get this franchise back to where it has to be, we have to get the guys that are young playing so that we find out who we have as a fan, as a core moving forward, but also that you get rid of these guys. Like I say, right? JVR, who's got an expiring contract, who is going to walk at the end of the year.
Yeah.
And you get nothing for him. Even if it was whatever, a late
mid-round pick, I think was what was discussed. There was, and I think this has been this way the last couple of seasons. The trade deadline is always, now, like a lot of teams like to get their business done a week or two out before then.
Yeah.
And the fact that I think that the Flyers were waiting till the
the absolute last minute,
which felt like the last minute. And I mean, we were talking. I mean, the JVR rumor. I think it was either Darren Drager, one of the top insiders, had put out online that that the deal was happening with Detroit, with the Red Wings. Van Riemsdyk was headed to Detroit, and things fell apart. And I mean, this was like literally the last half hour that of the deadline, and it was kind of like, I mean, I'm not privy to what happens to the conversations that happened all the weeks prior to that, but the optics are terrible.
It looks like you just punted on the season and just decided that
yeah. And maybe Chuck came in late that day, and the phone was ringing, "Hey Chuck, we need you over here."
Hey Chuck, the trade deadline is actually today. It almost feels like it's like one of those days where like you wake up super late, you miss the alarm clock, and you're like scrambling to make up 8 hours of time that you missed because you slept until noon.
Yeah.
And I don't for the life of me understand, right? How as an organization, and that tells me how disconnected the organization is, like top down, that how disconnected are they that they're not saying these guys need to get moved. These guys are expiring contracts. These are guys that we brought in that don't have any value to us at the end of the season. So we need to get some kind of value for them.
Yeah.
And I just, that to me just sent up the red flag to say, like, what is actually happening?
Yeah.
And, I don't know if you saw, there's an interview and then an article with Anthony Sanfilippo, who does a great job covering the Flyers, who kind of made an inkling into that this is not the last move that's going to be made, that there are some moves that might be higher up with guys that might have some influence within the organization that they might, and I'll kindly ask to step aside, that still be the ambassadors for the team, but no longer be part of that day-to-day transaction conversation, that they really, because they, since Ed Snyder, passed and the salary cap came into play, this team has really struggled in managing the roster, because before that, let's just be honest, right? Ed Snyder would just spend. He had money to burn and he spent it, and he would just bring in guys, and use that to overcompensate and fix the roster. Since the salary cap, they don't have that option anymore.
Yeah,
And
kind
they've
of. No, go.
no, they I was just gonna say they've really struggled in that department.
Yeah, you know, it kind of levels the playing field when it comes to the hard salary cap and things like that. Some of the things that have been discussed by Anthony Sanfilippo and others, um, it's interesting because we don't know to the degree in which some of the old guard, uh, Holmgren, Clark, Bill Barber is involved. He's, you know, a lot of people, which I don't even think. I don't know how much. From what I've gathered and what I've understood is that he was kind of like the hockey tutor of Dave Scott's.
Jesus
Um,
God.
and if he has the ear of the boss, and these guys are running ideas past him, or they're involved, or you know, they're involved to whatever degree. But if you're running them past the guy who doesn't know if they're good ideas or bad ideas or not, that's a big. This is a step in the right direction. I think
Yeah.
Briere is an intelligent guy. He seems to have the respect of the hockey people as a former great player. He's earned the respect of Comcast Spectacor as a, you know, in a business uh, in a business sense. He seems to be well regarded in every aspect, in every corner uh, of the organization, which is great.
Yeah.
And it sounds like he's going to be involved in whatever they're doing moving forward, whether he's going to be the general manager, whether they're going to have him as the vice president of hockey ops, which is a role that's going to be filled. Chuck
Right.
held both roles, apparently.
Yeah.
Um,
And it might not be a bad idea to have multiple voices at the top to be able to bounce an idea off somebody.
sure. And having guys that have a clear vision for what this team should look like in the future. And I think with to go back to the Scott thing, that's kind of been my whole. That's been the opinion I've been of since this was like you can have. It doesn't really matter to me if Paul Holmgren's around. I mean, they shouldn't be influencing decisions, obviously, but um, if there's if the guy that's taking in that information doesn't know if those ideas are good ideas or bad ideas, and he's just kind of riffing, I just don't. That's still a problem.
Yeah.
That's still going to be a problem. And I don't know if there's been talk about, you know, is Scott going to be one of those people? Is he going to step down and retire? If he does, I don't know who would be considered for that role, but there's a lot of things. There's a lot of moving parts, and we're going to hear about a lot of different people leading up to throughout the summer. And it's an important summer for the Flyers, just from like the hockey ops side of it. Besides what's going on upstairs, they're going to have a top 10 pick, maybe a top 5 pick. They have to nail this pick.
Yeah. Fingers crossed on
So
that one, right? Like,
yeah, and it's like there's a lot of other things going on, a lot of other moving parts. We don't even know who's going to be going to the podium to decide who is going to who they're going to select in that,
yeah.
and it's a really important draft. So
Yeah. And listen, we can keep our fingers crossed, right? That the ping pong balls bounce our way and that you're able to get into that section of that draft at the top end of that draft where you could really get a guy that could be some franchise altering talent.
yeah,
But part of me also feels like, do they have the people around the organization to really develop that guy? Like, I know that like Connor Bedard seems like a guy that is just going to be an immense talent in this league,
he's
regardless
special.
of
Yeah,
the guy, regardless of who's, quote unquote, guiding him. But you also wonder the way that they've chose to develop talent and how
Right.
that transpires to, it doesn't surprise me that a guy like Provorov is super frustrated and probably would like to move on, right? Because he's essentially been the only steady hand on that back end that has been reliable. But he's been there around a merry-go-round of guys that have just come in that aren't really super talented. And you're talking about trying to protect Carter Hart, right? You thought you were bringing in guys. It just never, the guys that they brought in never really translated to what they actually thought it was going to be.
Yeah. I and when it comes to like I think the roster configuration, and I think John Tortorella has done as good of a job as he could have done. I think we talked about that a little bit the last time I was on the show.
Yeah.
And I think with when it comes to like the roster configuration part, it's and we talk a lot about culture and things like that. The culture will fix itself if there's more talent in that room. If you
True.
start winning some games, guys feel better. I look at a kid like Joel Farabee, who I think is a part of the Flyers'
Yeah,
future.
absolutely.
He's been downright awful all year, and he's recovering from the neck injury. I think that has something to do with the fact that not having a full summer of working out and things like that, recovering from the surgery.
Definitely.
I think that affected him, and it's just kind of snowballed from there. Where maybe he's probably fully healthy at this point, but it's been a confidence thing. He's played poorly most of the year. It starts to snowball a little bit. The coach is on him. There's a lot of factors there.
Yeah.
So like I look at a player like that, but like they're in a position where they really, really need Joel to figure it out, because if he doesn't, they don't really have much in way of offensive firepower uh, in the lineup. And I'm just using him as an example. I'm not putting it all
No,
on
no, no,
Joel,
absolutely.
but it's I think some of the things that they go hand in hand, the culture thing and the winning, or trying to build a winning culture. There's only so much of that you can do before
Right.
you actually start, just like the rubber meets the road, and you start actually winning. Uh,
Yeah, and
s-
I think this is a start, right? It's a,
yeah,
it's a it's a jumping off point for them to potentially begin to change the trajectory of the franchise, right? Because as we speak, right, there's a silent protest happening down at the at right outside the Broad Street Bullies down at God,
Xfinity
why am I
Live,
blanking
right?
on Xfinity Live,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah,
they've organized, even though right they're not at home today,
yeah,
right? they're they're at a place right where the fans are really getting a chance to voice their opinion,
yeah,
and it's not going unnoticed, which is it's a good start.
yeah,
But I think the trade deadline super confusing, right?
yeah,
So like of the moves that they made, right? They move Isaac Radcliffe for essentially future considerations, which is basically saying we want somebody or something. We just don't know. We don't have a clue what we want right now.
yeah,
Um, right. Zach McEwen gets moved to the Kings for Brendan Lemieux. Right.
yeah,
Patrick Brown goes to Ottawa for a 6th-round pick. Right. Nothing monumental, and nothing that I think anybody really thought those guys like just very confused as
yeah,
to why those guys and from what I heard, the Brendan Lemieux thing was like a throw-in
yeah,
that
yeah,
like they were on the phone with LA in exchange. They were literally just going to exchange the 5th-round pick, and they said while they're having the conversation, they're talking about possibly having to, they're interested in moving Brendan Lemieux in another deal, and they're like, well, we'll just take him.
we'll just
It's
take them.
like, like that to me is like is the epitome of the trade deadline for this team right now, which is like it felt like just like shit just kind of happened around them.
Right, right. Yeah, I think that was really the again, it goes back to just a um, I think fans felt, and I have no idea if this is true or not, but I know that the fans felt that, you know, Chuck was not in any position. He had lost all of his leverage in other general managers around the league felt like they could take advantage of him. And
Yeah.
um, I have no idea how truthful that is or anything like that, but that was the sentiment,
It
and
surely felt that way.
it looks that way, and it certainly looked that way. And I wonder, like, as far as the trade deadline went, I think we were hearing like the other names, some of the bigger names, the Kevin Hayes thing and all. Those
Right.
deals tend to be a little bit more intricate, like when you're retaining salary and things like that, especially with a guy that has, I believe Hayes has like 3 years left on his deal or something like
Yeah.
that. I would not be surprised if something like that happened in the summertime.
Off season.
Uh,
Yeah.
but maybe some of that was like laying the groundwork for doing making a deal like that. Um, but it was really the the Van Riemsdyk thing that
Yeah.
the other parts were kind of tinkering with the fringes of the roster. Brendan Lemieux, for example, is going to get like a 19 game tryout here, although I believe he's hurt right now.
Yeah.
He was going to get somewhat of a extended look. He's a free agent after this year. But he does kind of feel redundant in a lineup that needs more talent. They already have Nick Delorier under contract. I think
Right.
Wade Allison's going to be around. Like they have guys that play like that heavy style, that physical style already, and they just need more talent like up front. And it's
Yeah.
just they played a good game. Like the other night they played Carolina, who's on a tear right now.
Yeah.
The Canes look like they're peaking at the right time. They're a really good team. They're my pick actually to come out of the Eastern Conference this year. I know
Okay.
everybody's on Boston, but I think the Canes are going to come out of the East here for the Stanley Cup. I love the way
I
that
think if I just kind of peek ahead,
yeah
that matchup, that potential Eastern Conference Finals matchup could be a 7 game back and forth. Um, it's interesting though. It could also be that Boston just goes in and just cleans up too.
just runs rush over everybody.
It's I just the way that they've been playing is just kind of wild.
Yeah. My only worry about the Bruins, I think, at this point, is for as great as they are, and they're just flush with talent. It's enviable right
It
now, like
is
how
really.
how good they are. Um, but I do worry a little bit about maybe them peaking like a month or two too early.
Okay.
Where um, I find that the way that Carolina plays is a lot more sustainable. I think Rob Brendamore's the best coach in the league today. I think he's an excellent
Wow.
coach.
Okay.
Um, the way he interacts with his players, the way he works with his guys. Um, you
Very
know, and
akin to the way he played.
yeah, and he was an excellent player. And you look at him today, he looks like he could still play. Uh,
It's kind of wild.
the physical
But
shape he's in is
the
incredible.
physical shape he's in, but his now that I sit here and think about it, right, the coaching style that he has is very akin to the way he played.
Yeah,
And I think it resonates with a lot of players because he was talented, but not top end talent.
yeah,
He was a guy that knew his role and made contributions on a roster that had a ton of talent anyway.
yeah,
Um, and I
yeah,
think you're right, like that coaching style is really easy to resonate with the players because
yeah,
you have the mindset. They can get down and be like, okay, I understand where you're coming from.
yeah.
So
So I think that I'm a really big fan of Carolina, and the Flyers really hung tough with them the other night when they played them. They lost 1-0. I thought Felix Sandstrom played his best game of the season. He
Yeah,
hasn't played a lot, but he played really well. But in games like that, I think like against other teams, for as well as they played, I mean, there's clearly a cap on how much you're going to get out of this group. I think John Tortorella has taken them when they're playing well. He's taken them as far as they can go, as far as and you're looking at that, right? Like that's how it's going to look. You're gonna have to grind games out 2-1 or 1-0 in order to beat with some of these top teams, and they just that's a hard way to play. It's hard to win that way, and
definitely.
the whole crux of the issue, I think, is just the lack of talent. They need high end talent.
Yeah. Well, listen, we're going to take a commercial break. We'll come back, talk a little bit of the trade deadline throughout the rest of the league. Maybe get into some games around the league, and then we'll wrap it up. So hang tight, everybody. We're going to be coming back with these quick commercial breaks.
Von C. Brewing Company is a 20-barrel, 16,000 square foot microbrewery with a 2,500 square foot tasting room, including a spacious outside beer gardens in Norristown, PA, in the heart of Montgomery County. The Von C. family is part of the family that started C. Schmidt and Son Brewing in 1860. Stop in Wednesday through Sunday and taste a variety of draft and 16-ounce cans of originally brewed beer and tell them the Drunk on Broad crew sent you. Von C. Brewing is located at 1210 Stenbridge Street, Suite 300 in Norristown. Cheers.
Team Clicks are the only glasses for real sports fans. With interchangeable arms, you can support all of your favorite teams, or even make and create custom options as well. These die-hard sports fans have realized that sports fans needed something other than face paint to show their love and passion for their teams. Go to teamclicks.com/DOB and show your love for your hometown team.
La Torrens' curated collection of men's and women's watches is a perfect investment that lasts for years to come and fits perfectly with your every outfit and style. Our range of classic watches aren't just a great perfect formal and casual accessory, but a time machine that takes you back to memories. Explore our collection of timeless watches that can reflect your taste, personality, and personal style. Our exclusive collection of carefully curated, affordable luxury watches is what you need to make a personalized style statement. You can take pride in your prized possession, handing it over to the next generations as your most loved asset that they can also own and display with the same pride. These high-quality pieces stand the test of time, giving exceptional value and return on your investment. Go to la-touraine.com and use code DOB at checkout and get 10% off.
If you're looking for unique sports apparel, check out Streaker Sports. They've dug deep into the archives and have brought back some incredible defunct team logos and have even created entire defunct league collections. They also have collections paying homage to sports culture, including the Miracle on Ice, Slap Shot, Caddyshack, the Mighty Ducks, and even have a license with Wiffle Ball and USA Hockey. Only for Drunk on Broad listeners, use code BROAD at checkout to get 10% off anything at streakersports.com. Again, that's 10% off anything at streakersports.com with discount code BROAD.
All right, welcome back. We're back. So, Mark, we left off. We were kind of dialing in the moves that the Flyers made and kind of trying to dissect those as best as we could. But around the league, right, there were some big names that moved. Talk to me about a move that you like for a team.
I thought one of the real shocking moves, and it wasn't the initial move, it was the second move that was made, was the Jonathan Quick trade that the LA Kings made. Sending him to Columbus, I think, was the first steal. And then Columbus then flipped him to Vegas. And That was really crazy. Jonathan Quick's one of those guys that it sounded like from what I read that he was very shocked and not very happy about that move. I think he looked like he looked at it as if he was going to be an LA King for life.
Right.
And what more can you do for an organization? Bring them back 2 cups. He was fantastic during those runs, and
Wow. Yeah,
and they shuffle him along to Columbus, of all places.
Yeah.
The worst team in the league.
yeah.
Was
It almost seems like that they knew maybe Columbus had another move in play.
right,
Um,
right.
but I mean, for him to go from LA to Columbus, where you're essentially shipping him off to the team that has the worst record in the league,
Yeah,
it didn't make sense. It didn't make a whole lot of sense coming when that initial move was made. Now to then flip him to Vegas,
yeah.
you're
And
at least putting him in a conversation for a playoff run.
yeah, and the interesting thing is, I think about the deal. One of the reasons why it was just as from a fan perspective is that LA and Vegas could run into each other in the playoffs. And
Kind of wild, right?
yeah, and if Quick is the goalie for Vegas and he plays the Kings in round 1 or 2, I mean that's going to be really, really interesting to watch. So that was kind of surprising. That move, the trade deadline day itself was kind of slow. A lot of the big moves came a week or 2 before. It's very, very strange. I think, as you mentioned earlier, watching Patrick Kane now in a New York Rangers uniform is very, very bizarre. Another player I thought was going to be, a Black Hawk for life type of thing, and
yeah. I mean, and listen, the Rangers, they also pick up Tarasenko, right? So
Mhm.
they're kind of packing it all in for this run.
Yeah,
So more power to them, right? They make the deal, the 3-way deal between them, the Blackhawks and the Coyotes. And then they get the secondary deal with Tarasenko from the Blues. The way that I look at it, right, it seems like the Rangers came out, right, whenever the rule of thumb for me with trades is like whoever gets the best guy in the trade at that moment,
yeah,
that is the team that wins the trade. So
right.
like if you're on trades where you are acquiring Patrick Kane, where you're acquiring Tarasenko, whatever you gave up is really insignificant because the chances of any of those guys panning out into what Patrick Kane or Tarasenko would be,
Yeah,
right? Like you're talking about picks, you're talking about players, but you're not talking about like franchise altering players. You're talking about guys.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Especially if it's down. You're acquiring players who are still of that prospect age. You're still talking, maybe 3 to 5 years before they could even potentially be a top 6 player,
Right.
or a top 4 defenseman or whatever it is you acquire in the deal. Yeah, I agree with that. I think, speaking of teams like loading up, another one was the Ryan O'Reilly trade that's sent him to Toronto,
Right.
uh, and they look just as deep up front.
They do.
And I mean, that's kind of their bread and butter these last couple years is just being like a really deep, talented offensive juggernaut. But adding O'Reilly in a trade there, I thought was a really, really. I mean, he's got that 2-way, Selke level game,
Yeah.
and
I say he's normally in that conversation. So it's like that when you can add, a guy that's going to play both ends of the ice, especially in the playoffs,
yeah,
where every shift is a shift that could alter the trajectory of the game. I think for me, right, that's a move where again, you got the best guy in that trade.
yeah, 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 and they're very, with O'Reilly, I think I mean, he's won before. He won in St. Louis.
Right.
And so he knows what it takes in those those tough series. And in the Atlantic Division, I mean, Toronto's going to have a heck of a time again.
Yeah. Yes.
And that's going to be a really, I mean, the battle probably, I mean, more than likely with Tampa Bay is who they're going to have to
Right.
leapfrog in that first round. And I feel like this year, although I think people have been saying that for quite a while now about the Leafs, that this is the year they'll be able to do it. I think Tampa is, for as great as Tampa is, I'm still waiting for that, for them to run out of steam. I mean, they've played a lot of playoff hockey over the last few years.
Yeah, I was gonna say they're deep playoff run, consistently deep playoff runs.
Yeah.
You have to think that on some level, at some point, it's going to catch up.
Yeah, and we've been saying that about them, but they've proven us wrong. They've proven me wrong every time. I thought last year was going to be
every
the year.
year, right?
Yeah, I thought last year was going to be the year. Turned out not to be that. And they're a great team too. I mean, talk about like a pedigree. They made that huge trade for Tanner Jeannot. I think I think that was before the deadline, but that was they throw a ton of picks at Nashville. And,
Yes.
And they were a team, they were getting Jeannot plays on the edge,
Right.
physical player, more of a power wing. They already have some guys like that, like with Maroon and stuff, but they're going to be a little bit tougher to play against, I think, with acquiring Jeannot. And that is the Eastern Conference in particular is just so deep.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you're at this point in the schedule, right? You've got 1, 2, 3. You've got 3 teams that are already plus on the plus side of 90 points, which it pales in comparison, right? To between there's between the Bruins, right? Between the Maple Leafs and Bruins, it's like 17 points between them and second place.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like you look down I'm trying to think. I'm trying to do the math real quick. This is not a math pod, but like the gap between the next 17, like between them, the next like 8 or 7 or 8 teams is how far you have to go to find that same point gap.
Yeah.
So, the Bruins, the way that they've kind of elevated their play over top of the rest of the teams in the Atlantic is just really, really impressive, right? And then you got the Devils are a team, right? They're a team that, as much as I want to give them credit, right, super envious of the way that they've been able to draft really good talent for the last couple of years, right? They sucked and were insignificant for a little while, but they hit on a bunch of young guys, and now that's kind of coming to, it's kind of coming to up, kind of boiling up to the top where they're playing really well, right? 4 points behind the Canes. It's really interesting to see that young influx of talent.
Yeah. And
but it also gives us kind of like a promise of like, that's potentially, if you suck for a couple years, you hit on a couple of draft picks, you could essentially turn this around maybe a little bit faster than people think.
Yeah. I'm a big believer in that too. With rebuilds in the NHL, I believe, just like looking at how other teams have done it, you can turn it around in a 3-4 year situation if you're hitting on those top players, of course.
Right.
And the Flyers could have worse years, I think, to be in the situation they're in, because this draft is really deep, especially those top 10, 15 players. We're talking like really, really gifted players, even outside of Bedard. Adam Fantilli's the projected, I think, number 2 pick. I believe
Right.
He goes to University of Michigan, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's an uber talented player, very gifted. The Flyers would be lucky to have him as well, even if it wasn't Bedard. That's a pretty good consolation prize, I think. So, they're in a situation where it's hitting on those picks. It's the Devils are, as you said, it's a very envious situation. Watching Jack Hughes play, he's an incredible young player. I feel like the Devils looking ahead for like just this year. I mean, their future looks outstanding, but
Yeah.
I feel like they're a little bit too young. This
You think?
experience this year will be good for them, I feel. Um, I don't think they're going to get past the Rangers or the Canes, but if they
Yeah.
do, I wouldn't be surprised by that.
I
Um,
think they're how do I say this kindly? I think they're young and naive enough
yeah,
to not have a thought about what it takes to get there and just play really well.
yeah, I could see that.
You
I could
know,
totally see that.
that's something where it's like they don't know that road of not being successful where
Right.
some of those other teams that have kind of faltered, in the first and second round in the last couple of years. This team is kind of young. Like it's funny because I'm looking at the player profile pictures and every dude looks like he's like about 18 or 19 years old. Not that they are, but like the appearance, you can tell that
Yeah.
like most of that roster is young, really young, talented guys. And I just it kind of sucks because it does make me super envious that they were able to identify that need of changing the trajectory of the roster to be able to get younger and faster and build a team that's going to play really well in this league right now.
Yeah, and I think one of the things about Jersey too was that it in terms of like rebuilding and things like that, their decision making wasn't just and this is my hope for the Flyers. It wasn't just about the draft. The draft was always the most important element, but they went out and they made some moves. They went and got Dougie Hamilton on a huge deal. They were
Yeah.
in the conversation um, all summer long, I believe. Their names had come up with the Johnny Gaudreau sweepstakes.
Right.
And then they didn't get Gaudreau, but at the right before the deadline, they acquired Timo Meyer, who's an incredible talent.
Right. Wow. Yeah.
That was one we didn't mention. That was a great trade for Jersey.
Kind of went
And
under the radar.
yeah, and so like acquiring Meyer and things like that, even though they had an eye on the future, when the team proved that they were, hey, like we're playing well, and the upper management rewarded them for that, for playing well and going out and making some right now moves to help push the team to the next level. And the Flyers have to think about that as well. Yeah, we need more talent, absolutely. But if there's a player that could be had, whether it's free agency or otherwise, and he fits the age bracket for you, and and you have the cap space to do it, I'm still on board with the organization going out and acquiring guys that way as well. It just takes a little bit of luck, and I think a little bit of courage.
Yeah, a little bit, and a little bit of trying to be creative with the salaries, trying to be creative with the moves.
Absolutely.
I think when you build a young, talented roster, it might give you the flexibility to be able, because you're not spending the money on salary,
Sure.
that you have that flexibility to go out and make moves like the Devils did to be able to supplement, right? I don't think anybody's naive enough to think that you can build the roster completely internally. And
No.
I think the point that you make is really good because you're talking about how do we supplement this roster as this process is happening.
Yeah.
So,
And that's my hope for the job Briere's doing, or will be doing, is that I think when we kind of look back at Fletcher's time with the organization, the first off season I think was really was a solid one. They went out, they signed Kevin Hayes, Radko Gudas. They traded Radko Gudas for Matt Niskanen. acquired Justin Braun, Tyler Pitlick. There was some good some small gems in that trade that summer where
Right.
they went out and made some moves that helped that team at that time. And it was one of those things where, you know, the team looked like they were peaking at a good time, and then the pandemic happened, and they
Yeah.
never really got back on track after that.
Yeah.
And that kind of leaves us where we are now. But I think with Fletcher, it was very, as you mentioned, Don, about there was a lack of creativity there when it came to trying to put together a good roster and a good collection of players. And my hope for Briere is that he has a little bit of that creativity that we see around the league,
Yeah.
where, you know, you can build through the draft, but as you said, that is one element. That can't be the only thing that you do.
No.
So I think that's important for them.
Now, listen, anything else around the league? Like, because I want to touch on something real quick. Like,
Sure.
when I look at the overall statistical leaders, right?
Mhm.
Talk about the year that McDavid is having, because he's a guy that, like, if they're on, and it's hard because, right, they're normally a late night game.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever he's on, that's a click and stick for me. Like, to watch him. I know, and forgive me, I'm almost positive. I think we talked about this last time, but like, it's just he continues to be a guy that just impresses me week after week after week, right? And he's 28 points north of Draisaitl, who's in second place.
It's ridiculous. I talk often with a lot of my buddies about my buddies that are fans of the league too, and we talk about, like, when we talk about Connor McDavid, I think it's like, it isn't just the talent level that's so special about him. It's the speed at which he does some of the things that he does. When he gets
It's
ahead of
bonkers.
steam, like, I mean, it's way easier said than done. But when he starts to, like, rev it up in the defensive zone, and he's got the puck and he's going end to end, which we see him do all the time, and he, like, just some really good players and some very good, the best league in the world, right? The best hockey league in the world. And he's just slicing and dicing guys through the neutral zone.
He makes guys look foolish. And have you seen the commercial where the NHL? It's one of the NHL commercials where they're talking about the video game hacks that used to happen with the NHL, right? But they're interspersing the highlights with most of which I remember is Connor McDavid highlights. Of him doing exactly what these moves were, that were like
video game.
They were the video game hacks from, like, NHL 97.
Yeah.
Where, like, you knew if you got the guy in the right position every time, you could score a goal. It didn't matter how crappy the player was that had the puck. But then I'm watching, and it's amazing to see. But, like, I'm gonna make a cross sports reference here.
Okay.
You just talked about how, like, him getting revved up in that defensive zone and just getting that head of steam. And having watched the Sixers-Bucks game last weekend, when you said that, I immediately went to Giannis.
Yeah.
Right? Because Giannis does the same thing. He can get the ball in the backcourt, and unless you're physically standing in front of him, he just gets that head of steam, and he just gets to the bucket every time, and really takes advantage of that, because he knows that that's something based on his size and his speed and his skill level. He's not pulling up and shooting a three because he knows that that's not the best part of his game.
Yeah.
But he's able, like, that head of steam thing is just, when you combine it with his skill level, just really, really incredibly impressive to watch.
I think that's a really apt like cross sports reference, like watching Giannis, because it's like, if you're in the lane, if you're standing in the lane, I mean, like, you don't want any part of this guy when he feels a head of steam come at you.
Not at
I'd be
all.
I would probably just move out of the way, just let him get his bucket, because he's gonna get them. Uh, but yeah, I mean, this season McDavid's had has been incredible. The league's been, the league in general has been a lot of fun this year.
Yeah.
With a lot of like, the game's so fast today and so skilled, and it's a lot of fun to watch on a nightly basis. You can catch two teams that you have no rooting interest in, no vested interest in, and see a really, really good game. Uh,
I think that's
and
now where I'm at,
yeah,
right? Because I really, to be honest, as much as we're Flyers podcast, I don't have a huge, strong desire to like be dialed in and watch the Flyers.
yeah,
But I do like to watch hockey, and I
yeah,
will watch just the random games that are on. The product is significantly better, and it also makes me simultaneously angry at the same time because I want to watch my team that way.
yeah,
And now having the sports year that we've had with the Phillies and the run that they've had, and the Eagles that the run that they had, and you can throw the Union in there for their performance
for sure.
for the finals, right? And
Mhm.
I'm watching this team going, I'm pissed, man. Get it together. I
Yeah,
want this because when you look at this town, when the Flyers are good, there is nothing better than being down at that arena for a playoff game.
yeah,
That environment is electric.
yeah, yeah, and that's a big part. Again, like to kind of like just more of a blanket kind of statement over all the things that we had discussed, and you talked about earlier the protest that's going to be happening down at the it's one of those things like, the organization has made a lot of mistakes. There's a lot of damage that's been done in terms of like fracturing their trust with the fan base, a loyal fan base.
Yeah.
But I've been to a couple games. I've been down to a couple games this year, and people are there and they care. It's not it they care, and it's disheartening. But people aren't necessarily just. I'm sure there are plenty of people doing that, but there are people down there that are there, and if for no other reason, to voice their displeasure and have people,
Yeah.
down to people coming down to the rink just to be mad about the situation, and they have a right to do that, and they should feel that way, because as you said, it does feel like if you're somebody who has feels a strong connection to the Flyers, all the excitement that exists in the city, part of it feels like it's missing.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah, it
because
really
the
does.
Flyers are just kind of existing. They're not really
They're
in
just,
anything.
they're in the sports landscape by osmosis.
Yeah,
They're just
pretty
kind
much.
of there.
And it's kind of a good thing, for if this team is to undergo more of a full-on rebuild type of thing.
Right.
Just looking at the sports landscape and things like that in the city, it's actually not that bad of a thing for the organization, or they probably don't feel like it is, to know
Right.
that the rest of the city's kind of on fire.
Yeah.
And
Maybe it gives them a little bit of incentive to want to be part of the party.
yeah, and I think
they're the guy with the glasses standing in the corner watching everybody else have a great time.
yeah, I think it was either the day before the Super Bowl, or it was, I think they played. No, they did play. They played Super
that
Bowl
morning?
Sunday. Yeah, they played that
They play
afternoon.
that afternoon.
And so it must have been the day before. I don't know if you had saw that clip online, but John Tortorella had the players, I think it was after practice, throwing footballs around on the ice. And
Okay.
and it was kind of like he had made a comment in post about it, and he had said, like, he wanted the team to feel like, to kind of feel the momentum of like the city being behind the Birds in this huge run. And that was an interesting way to do it, but I thought that was cool. And
No, that is. I like that.
so I mean, like, because they are a part of that, and it is it is as you said at the beginning of the show with the Briere hiring, it is a step in the right direction, and they are. We'll have to wait and see what happens next, but there's at least something that people feel like I don't know if anybody can really put their finger on if it's 100% the right choice, but it feels like the right choice to have Briere in that spot at this point in time.
Before we go into final thoughts, right?
Mhm.
Something had to happen. So
Yeah,
at the very least, you're making a change to see if it's the right move. If
right,
it's not, we'll make another change.
right,
But you had to do something
sure,
to continue to just aimlessly drift in the wrong direction when everybody else around you knows it's the wrong direction.
right.
It's at least comforting to know that they've acknowledged the fact that some kind of change has to happen.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
all right, Mark, we'll go to final thoughts. You got anything going on? Anything you want to talk about on our way out?
Nothing much going on for me right now. But the one thing I actually wanted to bring up, a story broke this week. I think it was the Philadelphia Inquirer reported it about the turf at the vet. Did you see this story and its
did.
connection to cancer or brain cancer or one of those
Brain
things?
cancer, and if I remember correctly, there was like 5 or 6 former Phillies
Yeah,
that all have the same type of cancer, all died from the same strain of that disease.
yeah.
Just
And I saw that story, and it was just it was very disheartening. And um, I wanted to kind of bring light to that on here with the final thoughts and uh, just it's just a sad situation all around, and I'm hoping for the best with that. So hopefully
yeah, I
there's
mean, I think, and it's ironic because I was actually going to talk about the same thing.
oh
It's it's sad and disheartening to know that was probably the world's worst playing surface.
oh
But to know that it's now connected with what it is and the traumatic effects that it's had on those people's lives. And listen, there could be other players that passed that we didn't even know that it's connected to.
right,
So I think the idea that the article's published so that it brings it to light, that it brings about the conversation, and it kind of goes back to what we always, the idea that the player safety is paramount to anything, right?
Mhm.
And to keep that in mind moving forward, I think is a great place to kind of keep in line with the idea that you want as much. We know that these guys are human and we
Yeah,
want them to be safe. And I think that knowing that was going on and knowing the details kind of, 20, 30 years removed, it's just, it kind of
yeah,
sucks because it's, for most of us, that's a place where we grew up,
yeah, yeah. It was
in the sports world. We just grew
yeah,
up there. And to know that it had such dramatic effects on those players just kind of sucks.
yeah. Your heroes, right? Like I many a times I had been down there as a kid for Phil's games and stuff. But I remember being young, going to the vet and thinking just looking out into the field, and it was the turf was gross. I mean, as
It
far
was
as
bad.
yeah,
It was bad. I actually played a game there in 8th grade.
did you really?
Yeah, for football in 8th grade. But it was
No
like,
kidding.
we all had to wear sneakers because we couldn't wear cleats on the turf because none of
Yeah.
the cleats worked. And but I remember it feeling like I was playing in a parking lot.
Wow. Wow.
And
Yeah.
I was like 14, so I didn't
Yeah.
really know the difference. But like it was not great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not great to say the least. Mark, do me a favor. On your way out, just give people the details. Let them know where they can find your articles, find your stuff, and
Sure. All my I do a lot of I'm on Twitter. All of my stories you can find at firedupsports.com. I'm on Twitter at Ramos Reports. I'm on Instagram at Ramos Reports 1. I believe it. I have a 1 on there. You'll see like we have a little logo that my girlfriend Emily made for me.
nice.
Yeah, so you can see all my stuff there. I post there as well, and yeah, that's where all my stuff's at.
Very cool. Well, listen, we're actually going to be back again tomorrow. We got some guys coming on. We got another fired up sports writer coming on tomorrow for some Phillies conversation. We got
Awesome.
the guys from the Drunk Phils fans Facebook page. We got those guys coming on to talk about some exciting stuff that they're doing this season. So on that note, Philly, it's been real.
Peace.
Later.
This is the Broad Street Line, where Philly sports fans leave all of their sports hot takes. Call 267-405-3062 and show us your passion for Philly sports. Don't forget to tune in every Wednesday at 8:30 when we listen to your live reactions to the thrill of victory or the agony of defeat.